Get back to our potential breakout candidates. Now, last week we did Charlie Jones, a rookie, a guy that, oddly enough, we're sitting here gushing about Tyler Boyd, but he could cut into some of those snaps out of the slot and or be part of 4 wide, 5 wide receiver sets. I saw we had a question about that earlier this evening, as well. So Charlie Jones, we felt like because of potential special teams contributions, a guy that can do the jet sweeps and end arounds from a wide receiver position, whether it's split out wide or in the slot. And then, of course, all of his receiving prowess, we felt like he was a guy that could come in, not necessarily put up huge numbers because we know the big three are going to be in front of him there on the depth chart, but a guy who can come in and contribute in a number of different ways. Well, the guy I have tonight is a guy that, again, can contribute. He's an offensive player, but again, a guy who can contribute on special teams potentially and as a multifaceted player. This is a guy who's had a really interesting career, John Sheeran, because he was drafted a handful of years ago and has had to absolutely bide his time with this team. And he's a guy that I feel could be poised really because of attrition at the position, and that is Trayveon Williams, a guy who has had to bide his time, and a guy, again, I have a lot of respect for. He's been bounced on and off the roster and bubble guy and not dressed and, all that kind of stuff. And last year, he didn't have the most carries or anything that he's had in his career. That was back in 2020, but we saw some flashes in big games from him. He's only got 47 carries in his career, 238 career rushing yards, does have a 5.1 yard per carry average, only 8 catches for 64 yards, but 8 per catch, 12 first downs of all those of 50 plus catches, 55 plus touches, 56 touches, I guess. 55? Yeah. 55 touches, 10 of those on the ground, 2 receiving, has no career touchdowns to his name. We're going to look at some clips here in a lot of different facets. But this is a guy, John, I think, now is he RB2? Is he RB3? Maybe split it with Chase Brown. Here he is a couple of years ago against the Cowboys, going out in the flat and just a nice little route and gets, picks up a nice 7-8 yards, just right what his average is. This is one of my favorite plays, and this was the game he really shined the most, I think, as an offensive player. Look at him keep the play alive. Makes a great catch on a play right here. And, I'm not down yet. Let me get an extra 2-3 yards on the catch against the Titans. That was a big play. Here he is now. Those were him as a receiver. Here's a couple of clips as a kick returner. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Chase Brown. We know, there's the Chris Evans experiment may or may not be over at this point based on his lack of just not being on the field. And this guy getting the kick return looks, there was, I think Evans did have an injury last year as well, but this is a guy you see here, nice little return there. Obviously the devaluation of kickoff returns, especially with the new rule that we discussed last week, there's some stuff like that going on. This is a nice little return as well, but you pop these occasionally. Maybe this is where, again, if there's a devaluation of that, maybe this is where he can come in. And then here's him as a running back. You see here, this was a really nice play here. Gets stopped and does not go down after first contact or second or third contact, really right there. Great run right there. Here he is, and again, a couple of years ago against the Cowboys. You see him just a nice, just work up the middle and get 9 yards there. And then here he is as a pass protector. I slowed that down. Not the best clip of him there. Obviously, the clips of that are pretty limited because the snaps and his role has been pretty limited in the offense there. But you can see, I mean, he'll get in there and put his helmet in there. Obviously, something that was also 2 years ago, so you have to think he's probably improved off of that at least a little bit since then. But man, this is a guy. I feel here's kind of my thing with it. I feel like Chase Brown could be a potential breakout player in the second half of the season. I feel like Trayveon Williams is maybe the potential breakout player for the first half of the season as the Bengals maybe then start to mix in a Chase Brown, that sort of thing. I think no Samaje Perine. Joe Mixon's getting older, and I think the Bengals do want to kind of mix up the touches and the carries. Williams may be RB3, but you could look at him as a kickoff returner, a guy that can do a couple of different things as a running back, receiving, rushing. And I think he's going to see more touches this year, not maybe a huge increase. He's still going to be a backup player, but I think he's a guy that could come in and, surprise a few folks.
I remember a couple years back when you remember like preseason hero Jacquez Patrick, he frequented the offseason a little bit. People love Jacquez Patrick because he made a lot of splash plays in the preseason. And I think he was still around when Chris Evans was a rookie and people wanted to see Chris Evans. There was a time, I think it was 2021, where it's like, what does Trayveon Williams really do here? Like, what exactly do you do here? It's the office space, right? And I think from the outside perspective, he wasn't the flashiest player, he wasn't the biggest and the most powerful, but he stuck around. And I think that was one of the surprises in one of these two previous off seasons. Like, hey, the Bengals got 4 running backs. Trayveon Williams is still one of them. He was the first running back that Zach Taylor took as a head coach in 2019, like one of the 2 6th-round picks from that 2019 draft with Rodney Anderson, who unfortunately injuries caught up with him just like they did in college. But Williams was always, like, he was drafted because he fit the previous blocking scheme to a T because he played with Jim Turner in Texas A&M, and he was always very at his zone blocking. And I think the I don't want to say intangibles, but I think he's just one of the smartest players that they have, and he's a professor on the side, so he's obviously got some intellect to him. But I think he's just a great practice player. I think he's always been able to do his job well, regardless of what the job is. And the fact that he never really popped off during his extended playing time when he could play and get on the field in the preseason has kind of altered the perception of him. But like in that Cowboys game and like in the very limited times we've seen him in the regular season, he's been all right. Like, he hasn't made a lot of splash plays like the Titans game provided some, but he's rarely had any negative plays too. So like, he's always been able, I think, to do his job at an effective level, just enough to stick around, right? To bide your time long enough to see if an opportunity does open up. And that's why he went from RB4 in the past couple of years to now a clear-cut RB3 like he was last year when he overtook Chris Evans. And Chris Evans' whole thing is that no one really knows what he does well, if he can do anything well. And Trayveon Williams does a lot of things pretty well, right? But nothing too extraordinary to ever be like a main feature back or maybe even a complimentary back that gets 10 touch games. So I don't know if I'm all the way in on him being like RB2 even for the first half of the season, but I think he's clearly like one of the top 3. Like, they only have 3 or 5 running backs on this team. He's clearly RB3. He's clearly going to make the team again. There's a reason why they signed him. And also, I think him overtaking Chris Evans as the kickoff returner, like, there's also, I think, some perception of that position. Like, you want like a great athlete there. You want a guy that can take, put on the burners and run back 100 yards. Mostly, I think it's about vision. And he's always Williams has always had great vision as a runner, and it's mainly just about finding the seams and finding the holes more than just having 4.4 speed, which he clearly doesn't have. So that's always, I think that's why they identified him as a reliable guy in the return game too. So I think reliability in practice in the offseason, he's just always done enough to stick around. And like you said, like, there is an opportunity for him to have an increased role now that Samaje Perine's out the door. I do wonder though, like, is he going to get those first reps behind Joe Mixon in training camp, or is that going to be Chase Brown? It's going to be a question that I'm looking forward to seeing the answer.
Yeah, it might be RB2A and RB2B, right? I mean, I think there's going to be a number of touches going around, and I think you mentioned kind of a jack of all trades situation with him, and I agree with that. But I do think the one thing that, I don't know if it's necessarily extraordinary, but I think it's pretty damn good, is what you mentioned, is his vision. And when you watch either those clips or even others of when he's, a lot of times he'll find the right hole to go to when he's running the football. Way more often than not, he'll find the right cut. So I think between and to your point also on kick returns, that's a valuable asset, right? Because if you're not going to be the burner, the Percy Harvin guy that's out running everybody, that's running a 4-3 or what have you on kickoff returns, you need to be able to find the creases. You need to be able to see where your blocks are lining up and navigate around those to make a big play. And I think he has shown, some occasions that he can do that. And kickoffs have become increasingly tough on players to pop big plays. So, I think this is a guy that I think we talk about maximizing your roster and maximizing your roster spots. This is a guy that kills a couple of birds with one stone in terms of a return man, a backup running back option, and a guy that can probably be somewhat reliable in some third down situations going forward on offense. So I just, if he can prove that he can pass block at a decent level and he can kind of continue to be reliable when called upon, I think this is a guy that's going to see more touches this year because of Perine being gone. Some fluidity with Mixon and obviously the age and all that kind of stuff. I see an increased role. How big of an increase, I don't know because of the Chase Brown effect, but I think I think he can be a guy where he'll provide you with a splash play or two potentially every game.
I do wonder if it's like, because with Samaje Perine, when he was added to the team a few years ago, no one expected him to have the role that he ended up having. And obviously, like, Perine had a more illustrious college career. He had draft status in comparison to Williams. But with Perine, it's like, okay, like, he can do some things here and there, and he can give you like 5 touches a game. But you're wondering, like, is there like a diminishing marginal returns here if you give him too big of a role? And that ended up not really being the case. Like, obviously, Perine is not like a great starter by any means, but he was fine with an extended role. And that's the biggest thing for me with Williams, because we haven't seen him with an extended role. And even if that's like, 8 to 10 carries a game as the guy who spells Joe Mixon, like, that's still, in the hundreds of carries in the season. He hasn't had that workload since his Texas A&M days. And it's good that he is a running back. And this is the position where, the required skill is not that great to get the production. But I do wonder if, like, we've seen the flashes here and there, and I do wonder if that efficiency and effectiveness would continue to translate should he be given more chances to do so. So I think it's good that they have 3 guys now, including Chase Brown, that they can all feel comfortable giving those chances, especially considering, the best of them. Joe Mixon is now going to be 27 years old, and that's usually when that cliff for running backs ends up hitting.
I had a thought last year about Perine, just total side note. I remember going to the Seattle game in, I guess that would be 2019, and seeing he was one of the last waiver wire pickups after final cuts. And I remember seeing him on kickoff coverage and then going, oh, wow, there's the new guy on kickoff coverage there. And then now I remember thinking late last year, when he's putting up these huge performances against the Chiefs, and going, wow, that guy's really come a long way from being a final cut waiver wire pickup kickoff coverage guy to valuable running back. But hopefully, if Trayveon Williams' number is called in a similar fashion, because God forbid Joe Mixon gets hurt or there's other issues happening, hopefully he can step up in the way that while it's been a small sample size, we've seen some good flashes from him. We'll see. Later.